Thanksgiving in my family is always a performance. The house smells of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and pies cooling on the counter. But beneath the golden lighting and carefully polished silverware, there's tension that no candle can mask. Everyone pretends to be perfect for the evening, smiling wide for pictures, laughing a little too loudly at jokes that aren't funny, and passing dishes like we're in a commercial for the perfect holiday dinner. This year, I tried harder than usual to play my part. I baked an apple pie from scratch, peeling, slicing, and layering each piece as if it would somehow earn me respect. I helped my mom set the table, lining up the forks and knives just the way she liked them, folding the napkins into neat triangles. For a moment, as I stood in the dining room and looked at the long table, I thought maybe this year would be different. Maybe I'd feel like I belonged. There was a seat at the table waiting for me, right next to my mom, my chair. It had always been mine. In family photos from years past, I was always in that spot, half smiling, half invisible. But at least it was mine. As the last dishes came out of the oven, people began crowding into the dining room. Chairs scraped against the floor. Glasses clinked as wine was poured. My cousins were already arguing about who got the drumsticks. The noise was thick, overwhelming, and I slipped away into the kitchen to grab my plate, telling myself that by the time I came back, I'd just sit down, smile, and blend into the background. When I returned, plate in hand, I froze. My seat was no longer empty. My cousin, the one who always seemed to get whatever she wanted, was sitting there, casually swirling cranberry sauce onto her turkey, laughing like she owned the room. My chair, the one I had set, the one I had been waiting to sit in all evening, wasn't mine anymore. For a second, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she just didn't realize. The table was big. There were plenty of seats. She'd see me standing there and move. But she didn't. She looked up, met my eyes for just a moment, and smirked. "Oh, sorry," she said, her voice light, careless. "I thought it was free." Free! Like I didn't exist. I glanced around, waiting for someone to speak up, for my mom to notice, for my dad to intervene, for anyone at that crowded table to say, "Hey, that's her seat, move." But no one did. They just kept eating, talking, laughing, acting like I wasn't standing there holding a plate that suddenly felt too heavy in my hands. And in that instant, I knew. This Thanksgiving wasn't going to be like the others. This one was going to change everything. I stood there, clutching my plate, waiting for someone, anyone, to acknowledge what had just happened. My cousin had stolen my seat, and the silence of the rest of the family was louder than the clatter of silverware or the chatter around the table. It was the kind of silence that tells you everything you need to know. No one was going to stand up for me. I cleared my throat gently, hoping that maybe politeness would fix this. That's actually my spot," I said softly, my voice barely carrying over the sound of laughter. My cousin didn't move. She didn't even look guilty. Instead, she popped a bite of turkey into her mouth and grinned, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Oh, really? Well, it's taken now," she said, shrugging as if the matter was settled. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. My fingers tightened around the edge of my plate. I was ready to insist, just a little firmer this time. But before I could open my mouth again, I heard a voice cut across the table. It was my uncle. His voice was sharp, dismissive, and loud enough that everyone heard it. "You can eat in the kitchen." The words dropped like a stone in the middle of the table. Conversation faltered for a beat, then quickly resumed, like nothing had happened. A couple of people chuckled. One of my cousins smirked, hiding it behind her glass of wine. Eat in the kitchen, like I was a child, like I was a guest in my own home, like I didn't deserve a seat at the table that I had helped set, for a dinner I had helped prepare. My mom said nothing. She just kept serving mashed potatoes, her eyes fixed on her plate as though she hadn't heard. My dad cleared his throat, but didn't look up. My sister whispered something to my cousin and laughed under her breath. I stood frozen, my plate trembling in my hands. Every instinct inside me screamed to fight back, to call out how cruel and unfair it was. But another part of me, the part that had grown used to being overlooked, dismissed, and treated like an afterthought, told me to stay quiet, to avoid making a scene. So I swallowed hard, forced my lips into what must have been the weakest smile of my life, and nodded. "Sure," I whispered. No one responded. No one looked at me. It was as though I had already disappeared from the table. I turned and walked toward the kitchen, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The plate in my hand felt heavier with every step. I passed the mirror in the hallway and caught a glimpse of myself. Red cheeks, glassy eyes, shoulders slumped. I looked exactly how I felt. Invisible. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't going to the kitchen. Not this time. I was heading upstairs to my room, and I was carrying more than just a plate of food with me. I was carrying a decision, and in just a few minutes, it would change everything. I closed the door to my room quietly, as if even the sound of it latching might spark another round of laughter from downstairs. The muffled clinking of silverware and bursts of conversation still floated up through the vents, a cruel reminder that the world hadn't stopped for anyone but me. "Down there," my family carried on, enjoying their meal like nothing had happened. Up here, it felt like the entire house was pressing in on me, heavy and suffocating. I set my plate down on my desk and just stared at it. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes. All of it looked cold now, tasteless, even though steam still curled faintly into the air. My appetite was gone. My stomach twisted, but it wasn't from hunger. It was from humiliation. I replayed the moment over and over in my head. My cousin sliding into my chair with that smug smirk. My uncle's booming voice, echoing like it had been burned into my brain. "You can eat in the kitchen." And the worst part? The silence that followed. Not one person defended me. Not my mom, who I had spent all morning helping in the kitchen. Not my dad, who barely raised his head. Not even my sister, who used to cry when I got picked on as a kid. They all sat there and let it happen. I tried to laugh at myself, but the sound came out cracked and hollow. I thought of all the effort I'd put into the day, the pie I baked, the table I helped set, the hours I'd spent making sure everything looked perfect. For what? So I could be told to eat in the kitchen like I was less than them? Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously. No, I wasn't going to cry. Not over this. Not over them. If they wanted me to be invisible, fine. I would be invisible at the table. But I wouldn't stay invisible forever. I sank into my desk chair and pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hand hovered over the screen for a long moment. I knew what I had drafted. I'd been working on it for weeks. Little notes, half-written paragraphs, even a few pictures I'd snapped quietly during family gatherings when the mask slipped and the truth showed itself. It wasn't just about tonight. It was about years of moments like this one, being overlooked, dismissed, laughed at, pushed aside. Tonight had just been the final spark. As I scrolled through the draft, my heart pounded so hard I thought it might break through my chest. My finger hovered over the screen, trembling slightly. Downstairs, another wave of laughter rose from the dining room, and that's when I knew I wasn't going to eat in the kitchen. I wasn't going to eat at the table. I was going to do something that none of them could ignore. I was going to hit publish. I sat in the dim glow of my bedroom lamp, the laughter from downstairs seeping up through the walls like smoke I couldn't escape. My phone screen illuminated my face as I scrolled through the words I had been collecting for months. Words I never thought I'd have the courage to release. The draft was raw, honest, brutal. It wasn't just about the stolen chair or my uncle's cruel command to eat in the kitchen. It was about years of little cuts that no one noticed except me. The birthdays where no one showed up. The times my achievements were brushed aside because someone else had done something more impressive. The way I was always asked to take the group photo, never in the group photo. Piece by piece, I had been building a portrait of my family that no Thanksgiving dinner centerpiece could ever cover up. And tonight, as I stared at it on my screen, I felt something shift inside me. My finger hovered over the glowing blue button. Publish. My chest tightened. What would happen if I did this? Would they explode? Would they cut me off forever? Would they finally see me, or would I just prove to them that I was the troublemaker they always accused me of being? I bit my lip until I tasted metal, my thoughts racing. Downstairs, another roar of laughter echoed, sharp and mocking. I could almost see their faces, plates piled high, glasses raised, acting like they were one big happy family, pretending the person upstairs didn't exist, pretending I didn't exist. Something inside me snapped. Invisible wasn't enough anymore. I didn't want to blend into the background. I didn't want to wait for them to notice me. I wanted them to feel, for once, the sting of being confronted with the truth they had buried under layers of holiday cheer. My thumb pressed harder against the screen, not quite enough to send it through. My heart pounded so fast, it drowned out everything else. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground beneath me begging me to step back, but the wind pulling me forward. I thought of my cousin's smirk, my uncle's voice, my mother's silence, and then I pressed down. The button flashed. The draft was gone. For a split second, panic surged through me. My stomach flipped, and I almost wished I could pull the words back, shove them into the dark corners of my phone where no one else could see. But it was too late. It was out there now. I stared at the screen, waiting. My phone vibrated once, then again. A like, a comment, a share. The first ripple had begun. Downstairs, my family continued to laugh, but I sat frozen, staring at the device in my hand, knowing they had no idea what was coming for them. And for the first time that night, I smiled. At first, it was just a quiet buzz in my hand. A notification here, a ping there. I glanced at my phone, expecting maybe a like or two from the handful of friends who always supported me no matter what. But this wasn't that. The post was spreading, fast. Comments began to flood in, scrolling so quickly that I could barely keep up. This is heartbreaking. How can your own family treat you like that? You deserve so much better. Stay strong. We see you. Every vibration of my phone felt like a pulse racing through me. My words I had been too scared to speak out loud, were now echoing in the hands of strangers. And instead of silence, I was being met with something I had never felt before. Validation. For a moment, I just sat there, my plate of untouched Thanksgiving food still on my desk, cooling under the glow of the lamp. I read each comment like it was oxygen, filling my lungs with something I didn't realize I had been starving for. Downstairs, I could hear forks scraping against plates. Another burst of laughter. This time, my cousin's high-pitched giggle. They had no idea that the image of our perfect family dinner was unraveling upstairs in real time. I leaned back in my chair, a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. For once, I wasn't the quiet one. For once, people were actually listening to me. Then the notifications shifted. It wasn't just likes and comments anymore. It was shares. People were tagging others, saying things like, "This is exactly what happened to me." My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was theirs too. It spread because it was familiar. Because invisible kids, forgotten siblings, overlooked daughters and sons, they saw themselves in my words. And in that moment, I didn't feel alone. Still, with every new ping, my stomach tightened. I knew what was coming. It was only a matter of time before one of them saw it. My cousin, my sister, maybe even my uncle. The thought of their faces when they realized what I had done sent a shiver of both dread and satisfaction through me. The phone buzzed again, harder this time. A direct message popped up. "Is this really about your family?" My breath caught. I didn't answer. Not yet. I glanced at the time. Barely an hour had passed since dinner started, and my post already had hundreds of likes and comments. I imagined the screen lighting up in people's homes, even as my family downstairs joked over pie and coffee. They thought they had silenced me by sending me away from the table. But what they didn't know was that they had given me the quiet space I needed to finally speak louder than all of them combined. And tomorrow, when the rest of the world joined the conversation, they wouldn't be able to laugh it off anymore. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the buzz of my phone dragged me back awake. Notifications stacked one on top of the other, until the lock screen looked like a slot machine stuck on repeat. By 2 a.m., the post had passed 1,000 likes. By 3 a.m., strangers were messaging me long paragraphs about their own Thanksgivings gone wrong, about how they had also been pushed aside, belittled, made to feel invisible. It was surreal. For years, I had carried the weight of believing I was the problem, that maybe I deserved the silence, the mocking, the dismissal. But as the night unfolded, comment after comment proved me wrong. People understood. They had lived it. And now they were standing with me. By dawn, my post had gone semi-viral. Tens of thousands of eyes had seen it. The sunlight crept through my curtains, pale and golden, illuminating the empty plates still on my desk, the cold turkey and stuffing untouched. My stomach growled, but I barely noticed. I was running on adrenaline, fueled by the strange new power of finally being heard. Then came the message. It was from my cousin, the same one who had stolen my chair. Is this about us? 3 question marks, as if the extra punctuation would intimidate me into denying it. I didn't answer. Within minutes, more messages trickled in. A missed call from my sister. A short, clipped text from my uncle. Take it down. Then another call. And another. My phone vibrated so violently it nearly slid off the desk. I sat there, watching it all happen, a storm breaking right in my hands. Downstairs, the house was silent now. My family wasn't laughing anymore. I could hear muffled voices in the kitchen, hurried, tense, nothing like the cheerful banter of the night before. Someone's phone rang, and then another. The energy had shifted completely, they knew. I imagined them gathered around, finally realizing that while they had been toasting and feasting, the real story of our Thanksgiving had been unfolding online for the world to see. And for the first time in years, they weren't in control of the narrative. I was. I stood by the window, watching the neighborhood slowly wake up. Joggers, kids with backpacks, cars starting. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed like a trapped bee in my hand. Every vibration was another reminder. The world knew now. I didn't delete the post. I didn't even reply. Instead, I set my phone down, sat cross-legged on my bed, and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. They had sent me away from the table. They had told me to eat in the kitchen. But now, the entire world was at my table. And my family, the ones who had made me invisible, were finally the ones who couldn't hide. By mid-morning, the house was buzzing with the kind of energy you could feel in your bones. Sharp, frantic, impossible to ignore. I had barely moved from my bed, my phone vibrating in waves beside me. Dozens of missed calls, texts piling up like a landslide, some pleading, some furious. From my sister, "Please take it down, you're making Mom cry." From my uncle, "You don't understand the damage you're causing." From my cousin, "Wow! Drama queen much? Over a chair?" And then from my mother, "Come downstairs, now." The capital letters made me flinch, even though she was just a floor below. For years, that tone had been enough to send me scrambling, eager to appease, desperate not to disappoint. But today, I stayed still. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. Not after last night. Not after thousands of strangers had confirmed what I'd always known deep down. It wasn't me. It was them. Still, when the pounding started on my bedroom door, my heart raced. "Open this door!" my father's voice thundered, deeper and sharper than I'd heard in years. "We need to talk about this right now." I swallowed hard, staring at the door handle as if it might twist on its own. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to breathe. Slowly, steadily. "I'm busy," I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. There was silence on the other side. Then, the sound of muffled whispers, quick and tense. I imagined them huddled in the hallway, the same people who had ignored me at the dinner table now treating me like a crisis that needed to be managed. Another buzz from my phone. This time, a message from an unknown number. "Hi, I'm a journalist with—" My stomach flipped. The post had spread even further. People weren't just reacting. They were watching, waiting, wanting to know more. The story had grown bigger than me, bigger than them. The knocking resumed, harder this time. "You don't know what you've done," my uncle barked through the door. "You've embarrassed this entire family. Do you have any idea what people are saying about us?" I almost laughed. That was the point. For years, I'd carried the weight of their words, their silence, their laughter at my expense. Now, for once, they were the ones being scrutinized. I stood up, gripping my phone tightly. "You told me to eat in the kitchen," I said loud enough for them to hear. "Well, I've moved to a bigger table." The hallway went silent. No footsteps, no whispers, nothing. Just a heavy, suffocating quiet that told me they didn't have a script for this moment. They didn't know how to control me anymore. And as the quiet stretched, my phone buzzed again. Louder, longer. This time, it wasn't just another comment or like. It was a notification that changed everything. The notification on my screen wasn't just another like, comment, or share. It was a headline someone had written about my post. At first, I thought it was some small blog or personal page, but when I clicked, my breath caught in my throat. It was a major outlet. They hadn't used my name, but they had quoted my words. "At Thanksgiving dinner, my cousin took my chair, and my uncle said, 'You can eat in the kitchen.'" I didn't complain. I picked up my plate, went to my room, and pressed publish. They framed it as a story about family dynamics, about neglect, about how sometimes the people meant to love you the most are the ones who wound you deepest. And now, it wasn't just strangers scrolling past on their phones. It was readers across the country. My phone exploded. Shares doubled, then tripled. Journalists reached out with interview requests. Influencers reposted my story with captions like, "This hit too close to home." People were stitching their own stories to mine, flooding the internet with their versions of being left out, ignored, or mocked at family gatherings. It had become a movement overnight. Downstairs, the muffled voices turned sharper. My name was being hissed between clenched teeth. Doors opened and slammed. The TV turned on, then off again. I realized with a jolt of irony that while my story had escaped our house, my family was trapped in it. Another message appeared on my screen, this time from my aunt, who lived out of state. "Your mom just called me sobbing. She says you're destroying the family's reputation. Is this really necessary?" I stared at the text for a long time. Destroying the family's reputation? What about destroying me? Where had she been all these years, when her brother and sister dismissed me like I was nothing more than background noise? Where were her messages then? The hypocrisy burned. And then, the funniest thing happened. My cousin, the one who had stolen my chair in the first place, messaged me again. "Delete it and I'll apologize." I actually laughed out loud. The desperation practically oozed from the words. For once, she wasn't smirking, wasn't smug. She was bargaining. But it was too late, because when I refreshed my screen, the numbers had jumped again. Tens of thousands had become hundreds of thousands. The headline had been picked up by another outlet. People in the comments weren't just sympathizing anymore. They were furious on my behalf. This is abuse. You should cut them off completely. Your family doesn't deserve you. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the powerless one. The world had knocked on my door, louder than my father, sharper than my uncle, clearer than my mother's silence. And unlike them, the world was listening. By the afternoon, the house felt like a war zone. I stayed upstairs, curled on my bed, scrolling through the avalanche of notifications. Every refresh brought thousands more comments, more people sharing their own painful memories. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a mirror for everyone who had ever been dismissed by their own family. Meanwhile, downstairs, my family was tearing itself apart. It started with hushed arguments, sharp whispers leaking through the vents. But soon, the whispers cracked into shouting. "You should have stopped her from posting!" my uncle roared. "How was I supposed to know she'd actually do it?" My mother snapped back, her voice shaking. "Now we're the laughingstock of the entire internet!" my cousin shouted. I covered my mouth to stifle a bitter laugh. For years, I had been their scapegoat, blamed for things that weren't even my fault. Now they were turning on each other, scrambling to pin the blame anywhere but themselves. Footsteps pounded up and down the hallway. Doors slammed. Someone knocked over a chair. The sound of glass breaking echoed from the kitchen, followed by my father's voice, low and dangerous. "Enough, all of you, all of—" Even through the floorboards, the silence that followed was suffocating. But it didn't last long. Within minutes, the arguments flared again. I heard my cousin crying, not out of remorse, but out of fear. "People from school are messaging me. They're calling me a bully," she wailed. "You brought this on yourself," my aunt hissed through the phone speaker. "She warned us for years, and none of you listened. Now you're paying the price." I froze. My aunt? The same woman who just texted me to take it all down? Even she was beginning to turn on them. I scrolled through my phone again, pausing on the newest headline. Viral post exposes toxic family Thanksgiving. And then another. The internet rallies behind young woman, shunned by her relatives. My family had always been obsessed with appearances. Polished smiles and holiday photos, polite small talk for the neighbors, a carefully curated image of warmth and unity. But that image had cracked wide open, and the world was peering in at the rot beneath. And I hadn't needed to shout, or beg, or demand they see me. I had only needed to tell the truth. Downstairs, the shouting swelled again. Accusations, denials, tears. My cousin's voice cracked as she screamed, "This is all your fault!" at someone. I couldn't tell who. For years, they had ignored me. Now they couldn't ignore the storm they had created. I sat there quietly, my phone glowing in my hand, a strange calm settling over me. For once, it wasn't me being cornered. It wasn't me apologizing, shrinking, trying to make peace. It was them. And they were crumbling. The shouting downstairs reached a fever pitch. My family was unraveling in real time, each voice cutting through the air sharper than the last. I sat there on my bed, calm in the chaos, my phone still buzzing with notifications. For once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. And then came the knock. Softer this time. Not demanding, not angry, just tired. "Please." My mom's voice wavered through the door. "We need to talk." I stared at the wood grain in front of me, remembering every holiday where I'd been shoved aside, every moment when my feelings had been dismissed like an inconvenience. A lifetime of swallowing words that never mattered to them. Slowly, I stood and opened the door. They were all gathered in the hallway. My cousin's face blotchy from crying, my uncle's jaw clenched, my father stiff as stone. My mother looked the smallest I'd ever seen her, shoulders hunched, eyes rimmed red. "You've embarrassed us," my uncle started, but my father held up a hand to silence him. My mom stepped forward, her voice cracking. "Can you just take it down, please? Everyone's talking. People are calling. We can't live like this. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt the strangest thing. Nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even the hunger for an apology I used to crave. Just emptiness. No, I said softly. My cousin's eyes widened. You can't do this to us. Do what? I asked, my voice steady. Tell the truth? The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting match. I held up my phone, the screen glowing with yet another headline. Toxic Family Thanksgiving Story hits 2 million shares. Their faces went pale as the number sank in. You wanted me in the kitchen, I said quietly. Well, I found a bigger table, and the world is sitting at it with me now. My mother's lips trembled, as if she wanted to argue, to beg, to make me feel guilty, but nothing came out. For once, they had no power over me. I turned, walked back into my room, and closed the door gently behind me. The phone buzzed again, this time not just with likes or comments, but with an offer. A podcast wanted to interview me. Then another message, a support group inviting me to speak. The story that had started with a stolen chair and a cruel comment at Thanksgiving had become something so much larger. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and began to type. Not another post this time. Something bigger. A story. My story. And downstairs, my family continued to crumble, their voices fading into the background, while mine finally began to rise.